Scabby
Podcast. In an ancient hotel in room 142 lay two foolhardy fools with nothing to do. They sit and they ponder about movies they've seen while trapped in their room and stare at their TV screen. Sometimes they play songs on the instruments they've amassed. They're Pinj and they're Maggie on the Scabby Hayze Podcast. Welcome to the Scabby Hayze Podcast. This is your co-host Maggie.
And this is your other co-host Pinj.
Today we are doing movie review on the 1931 German thriller M, starring Peter Lorre, a completely German film, which we had to is English subtitles because
we can't speak German.
We can't speak German and we're uncultured. Okay.
This is going to be a doozy of an episode.
It is. It's a happy movie. It's
very cheerful.
Full of flowers and laughter and family moments.
This movie made me feel so good at the end.
Yeah, not. Okay. First off, review.
Review? Do you mean like a summary?
No, I mean, what did you think of it?
What did I think of it? No other words. I like this film. Even though it is so dour, and I think melancholy isn't even an appropriate word to use for this film. It's really makes you think, and it keeps you in the moment, and it's so lifelike. It's almost creepy.
It is. It's hard for me to say. I think it would be hard for anyone to say that they didn't like this film because it was so lifelike.
It's true.
You can't take a serious subject like that.
Yeah, and just be like, it was lame.
Right, I was bored.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, maybe not on the same scale as Schindler's List, but a same kind of movie. I mean, Schindler's List was like an actual historical event. Almost like a docudrama. Mm-hmm. But this was taking a real life situation, which actually things that do happen in real life that are super serious and sad and somber but realistic, and making it into a movie. You can't just say, I don't like it, or I was bored, or it didn't have any entertainment value.
Yeah.
But they could have done it in a lot worse ways.
Now bear in mind, whatever you're gonna say, this was 1931.
Right. I was just going to say that they could have made it really bad by adding humor into it.
Oof,
and making it lighthearted and making it kind of a joke. Because it's not really.
Not at all.
A joke. Yeah. So, I would say that it's hard for me to also say that I enjoyed it because, I'll just say this. I recommend it because it's kind of classic.
Yeah, it's very iconic.
A very popular thriller.
Mm-hmm. And
Peter Lorre's acting is phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he's always
giving his A game.
And every single role that he plays, he's like really good at it. He's so convincing. So I would say that I recommend the movie because it's a classic, but don't expect to get laughs out of it. And don't expect to walk away satisfied, maybe?
It's...
because it does... well, the ending is left open.
Yes.
So, you kind of have to put your own... You have to find out what your morals are, your standards are, and fill in the blanks. I'd say it was a good movie.
Yes,
I can't say
certainly
that I enjoyed it, but I would say that it is a good movie. And that I would recommend it.
I recommend it on perhaps not on the level of classic, but more of like, just to really make you think. To question like, well...
Yeah, what do I think about that?
Yeah, what do I think?
Yeah.
How should this end?
Right. Yeah, it does raise a little bit of self-evaluation, yeah. It raises a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. And in that you have to find out what you think, apply it to the movie, and then... form an opinion on it.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, I guess figure out what your standards are. Mm-hmm. And your morals. Now, short synopsis.
A child murderer is going rampant in Germany. There's a reward sent out for him And everyone, just about everyone, is on the search for this man, and they can't find him. There's no trace, basically, except for like a few very ambiguous things that might lead them to the suspect.
Eventually, it gets so bad that the police are absolutely everywhere. They're on every block, every house, every corner of pretty much the whole city in Germany.
Country,
yeah,
wherever
it is, somewhere in Germany.
Yes.
Then the criminals are becoming inundated with police, and it's starting to affect their little jobs or whatever they have, their little illegal goings on.
Everyone's life is affected by this.
Right, and so the criminals form their own posse, per se, and start searching for him.
The whole lead up to that is also very interesting because you see him twice for maybe the first hour of the film.
Right.
Which is so interesting because you don't see him, you don't see what he's doing, you know what he's done, but you really see the world around him. It's affected by what he's done, his actions.
Right. And that's mostly what the movie is about.
Yeah.
How what he did affected everybody else.
Yeah.
And the scale of it was just immense and kept growing and growing. And the more people affected, eventually affected everybody in the city. Even the criminals. The movie is less about this man and more about the people that he affected.
Yeah.
Cinematography
For 1931? This is fantastic.
That was pretty good.
I mean, there was one shot, and I don't do this often, but I was like, wow. Like, out loud. I wowed, if that's a word you can use, at this film. There's a shot where the camera goes from outside, and it goes through, like, window pane. I still don't know how they do it. They do it somehow. But the camera goes through the window pane and into the indoors. And I don't know if it's like a seamless cut there or what's going on. But for 1931, it's fantastic. I mean, there's a shot in Citizen Kane that everyone basically marvels at. And that was made in the 40s. It's a very similar shot where the window's following through this house. It's going around, and then it comes from the top, and it goes through the glass, and it focuses on one character.
Yeah. It was a little bit like that. 10 years earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty impressive. I thought it was pretty good, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially for the time.
Right.
I mean, movies were 20, 30 years old at this point.
Right. And actually, I've seen a lot of old movies, and quite a few from the 30s, a lot from the 20s, tons from the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And there weren't that many awkward up-close angles that are usually in the old movies. So usually it'll zoom in on somebody's face.
Normally they're from like...
to capture their expression, but...
Yeah, normally they're like really from the stomach up. And right. It's just kind of a little bit zoomed in.
Yeah.
But this is very up close. There's so much emotion showed through this movie. The acting is fantastic.
Yeah, the acting is really good. In fact, there wasn't one bad actor in it.
No, not really.
Right. Even the minor characters, the people who are just standing by on the street that make little remarks or whatever, it all seemed so real.
The editing is so strange. It adds like this continual rhythm to the movie almost, of how it continues through telling the same story, even though showing different parts of it.
Yeah.
There's a scene where the gangsters, a specific group of gangsters, are talking about how they can find this man, this murderer, and then it immediately cuts to the officers talking about the exact same thing in the exact same way.
That's really cool. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
It's like a same group of people with the same goal in mind, with two totally different backgrounds, two totally different motivations. Yeah, very interesting.
And it's such a moving movie. Even though, like, sort of very dour, but in the world we live in, stuff like this is so common.
Yeah, it's really prevalent, which is sad.
But it's still crazy to, like, think that even in the 30s this was happening. But the movie takes itself so seriously, as it should, for such a crazy situation.
Right.
And it tells it in such a great way.
Right. And actually, it was kind of shocking to me to think that they would form that point of view where a man who claims to be forced to do all these murders because he is mentally ill and unstable, how that subject could have even come up in the 30s. Because I look at today and that kind of stuff happens all the time. There are people out there with mental issues and people who abuse drugs and stuff like that who do things when they're not in their right mind. But to think that stuff,
has been occurring
been happening for, 80 years? Yeah.
I'm sure this movie was heavily criticized when it first came out.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm sure, like, the impact this made was so probably offensive to the people back in the time.
Could have been. I don't know. I didn't really look up anything about the reviews that it got.
But I can imagine in some of the earlier films when, like, violence or such things happened, it was so heavily criticized and scoffed at, and it, revolted people. Right. But I think of a film like this, the impact it makes on the viewer and the story it tells, it's so grotesque, but
right. Yeah, I feel like
truthful in the same way.
A lot of people would walk away from the film being like, "Why would they make a movie out of that? Yeah, why would I have to sit here and watch that? That's horrible. I don't even want to think about it." But it is something you should think about, at least be aware of. So maybe it did raise a little bit of awareness that way. I don't know.
Like when you think of the films, no, I haven't seen every 20s and 30s film, but when you think of the time era this was around, silence they were getting a little older. This was a few years after that. Talkies were in. But the mood and, like, every silent, movies around there were always chipper,
Yeah.
There's they may have had... dramas were also starting to be big around that time, like The Jazz Singer, where it was a bit of a drama.
Yeah.
But films around the time were never something like this, where it took such a serious matter and, like, gave the viewer such a harsh question.
That's probably why it was so well known.
Most
why
likely,
it's still probably well known today.
Yeah, it's still prevalent today.
Right. So what do you think of the characters in the movie?
The characters? Well, I would say there's two characters. The city and the murderer. And that's really about it. The movie acts in a way where there aren't really specific people. Right. It's more of like a clock, where there's integral wheels that happen inside of it, but what you're mostly focusing on is the time. Time would be representing the whole town. Cogs would be representing the people in the movie. The people don't stand out separate.
Yeah. There's not a lot of names mentioned, aside from the head of the homicide department, the policeman.
Mm-hmm.
He's, like, the only one that actually has a name. But other than that, I mean, like you said, they're just people, playing a part in getting this guy.
Yeah.
And not actual characters. There's no hero, and there's no, There's not one man who saved the day or anything.
Yeah.
I think maybe it was kind of ironic that this movie was made in the 1930s.
So early.
In Germany.
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing.
Right. Because around this time was... World War I had ended. It was...
20 years later?
Yeah.
Around.
And World War II was just... I mean, things were stirring.
Things were starting to stir, yeah.
At this point.
Someone turned on the boiler.
Right. Subjects like this would have been super tender for people to take in.
Yeah.
And maybe even scary, wondering if maybe something like this could happen on a large scale in their country. I don't know.
It almost feels like a movie made too early, if that makes sense.
Right.
Because, like I said, you always think of, like, early films like that, always light, chipper, but this film is so, for lack of a better term, deep.
Yeah.
That it just doesn't almost seem to fit in that time era.
Right. I wasn't expecting it to be like that.
No, me neither.
All I knew going into this movie was that Peter Lorre was in it, and it was like a murder mystery.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much all I knew about it. And the other movies that I have seen with Peter Lorre in it have been comical.
Mm-hmm.
He's played
He's
kind of a comical character. I've seen him in...
a little creepy guy,
right.
normally.
Yeah, just a little creepy guy who's, you know, the little henchman, or usually not the main villain. But...
And it's weird. I'm supposing this was one of his early roles.
Yeah, he was really young, and he was chubby.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, he was kind of chubby.
I feel like this almost defined him in his later roles of, like, this is who he'll almost always play.
Right, he's the perfect person to play this kind of character, because he's so good at it. He's so convincing. Yeah,
I never once doubted, once in the movie, that he wasn't completely mentally insane.
Yeah, he did. He played it really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And watching the movie, like, whenever you do see him, it's like, oh man, this is actually what's going on right here.
Yeah. What did you think about the ending?
The ending? The ambiguous ending. What?
You know, I've asked you about 5 different questions. What do you think of the characters? The characters. What do you think about the ending? The ending. What do you think about the plot? The plot.
What do you think of the ending?
See?
See?
That was a good ending. Okay, restart.
What do you think of the ending?
I thought I liked how it was left open-ended.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my view on it. Since you asked me, this is my opinion. Alright, so the criminals catch the guy. They present him with a makeshift trial. They give him an attorney, so-called, and it's all the criminals in the city pitted against this one accused man. And so their thought process is, this attorney isn't ever going to be able to get enough evidence against this guy's actions to claim that he's actually innocent and that we won't kill him. So their goal was definitely, we get all these people together and we're going to kill him. Then the police show up in the middle of the trial, right as the whole entire crowd of criminals is getting ready to attack this guy and kill him. Mm-hmm. The police show up and they raid, and they take everybody in and they seize the murderer. They take him to a real trial. One of the mothers of a child that gets killed by him says, we should keep better care of our children. We should watch them more closely so things like this doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie ends. My thought on that is, yes, both of those things are correct. So the man definitely should pay for his actions, because if he was mentally ill, then that is a factor into it, but it doesn't change the fact that those crimes have still been committed.
True, but as the attorney says,
he said that if he was being forced into it, then it's not his responsibility.
Yes.
Then the responsibility doesn't fall on this individual who is mentally ill. Then the responsibility, assumingly, would have to fall on the parents, not keeping a better eye on their children. Mm-hmm. But, that is right and it's wrong. The parents do need to keep an eye on their children and know what their children are doing.
Course, yeah.
But you can't do that 100% of the time.
It's true.
And it's that little window where you blink or you turn your head or you assume that they can take care of themselves just for a little bit, that something bad happens. And, as harsh and as cold as it sounds, that's life.
It's true.
But I still think that, mental ill or not, he did those things. And if he was not seized or put in a cell or given the death sentence, whatever they were going to do with him, then they would have put him in an institution, a mental institution, and tried to get him better or whatever. But to what end? If they couldn't cure him, then his life would not be worth living, or he would escape and kill more people. Mm-hmm. But Or they could cure him, possibly. I don't know if that would even be a possible thing for them to be able to do, especially back in the 30s. I mean, I'm talking specifically about the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But if that was a possible thing for them to do, that would be great. But are your children worth the risk? Is it worth the risk to say, okay, well, he was mentally ill, let's get him to a doctor and see if he can be cured? But you always run that risk of, well, he could escape. Well, they might not be able to cure him. Well, this and this and this and this. I don't know. I don't think that the safety of the children is worth risking in this scenario. So my opinion on the movie is that they should have arrested him knowing that all of this evidence and stuff pointed towards him and he was actually the murderer, and of just mass murdering all these innocent children, should have given him the death sentence.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just my opinion.
My take on it is, I don't even know. I'm still almost like dumbfounded by the film. It's left me in this, I won't say drunken state, but like a state of...
A little funk.
Yeah, I'm in a little funk right now. And I'm not sure like where I'm left on the scale. The movie leaves it so ambiguous.
Right.
It doesn't tell you what your opinion is.
Right.
It tells you to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, you're supposed to form an opinion.
I know, and I'm not sure what mine is. It's so hard to tell. It is such a fine line between the two.
Right.
Though I would probably agree with you in saying the children's health is vastly more important.
Right. But, I mean, you do have to also consider that there are people out there with those kind of problems.
Mm-hmm.
Although I don't know if any of them are as serious as the urge to kill people.
Yeah.
I don't know. At that point, then I think they're a little bit too far gone, but I don't know.
Hard to say.
Yeah, it is hard to say, because there are mental illnesses out there that are serious, and it's sad, but those people need help.
Yeah. And like I said before, it's so crazy to think that this came out in 1931.
Yeah.
Like, if this movie was made today, it would be praised as,
Right.
so ahead of its time.
Right.
And, like, so deep and dark. And this was made almost, 90 years ago? 80 to 90 years ago.
Yeah. Something like that, yeah.
So crazy.
It's insane.
As you said before, you went into this film not knowing much. I went into it, I was expecting some sort of almost like Stanley Kubrick's The Killing, bombastic music, almost a noir film.
Yeah.
With he's constantly running from the police and he's constantly being chased and like this crazy, crazy thing. But it so isn't.
Yeah.
It's so different.
Right. Yeah, that's how, that's exactly how this one movie is. I watched it. It's called The Stranger, and it's a Orson Welles movie. He plays an ex-Nazi that's escaped to America and is living there and has to get hunted down. And that's kind of what the movie is like. It's him running and running and running. It's actually a really good movie, and the acting is really well. But that's a little bit more of what I expected from this movie, and it just wasn't the case. Yeah.
Yeah, this film is crazy.
Yeah. Really different than anything I've ever seen.
Very different.
It's kind of like the opposite of 12 Angry Men.
This is like...
It's like everything that 12 Angry Men was, this movie isn't.
It's like the 12 Angry Men could be like the... No, it couldn't. It couldn't at all.
No.
I was just about to say, this could be... 12 Angry Men could be like the sequel.
No.
But yeah, it absolutely couldn't. Never mind that.
Yeah.
There was an actual question of, did he do it or not?
Right.
In 12 Angry Men.
In 12 Angry Men, then it's you watching everybody's opinions being formed.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this movie, it's you watch the whole movie, and at the end, you form your opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
12 Angry Men's a good movie too, though.
I don't think so.
It is.
Okay, talk about boring.
Oh, it's not boring.
Yeah, it is. And some of the acting isn't that good.
I like the whole aspect of...
You like the old man whose head is way too close to the screen and you can only see his nose and his eyes. And he talks like this, and it's really boring.
It's not boring. It's such a strange movie of, like, influence, and you really question what you thought before, because it seems so obvious.
I don't know.
Like, duh, this is a clear-cut case. He killed the man. The kid killed the man. You know, there's no doubt about it. And then he's like, well, wait a minute.
Why are we talking about 12 Angry Men?
Needless to say, 12 Angry Men's a good movie. I argue on that. We could probably make a whole podcast on it, because we haven't talked about it that much before.
I don't like it.
Whatever.
It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I doubt my opinion has changed very much.
Perhaps we shall make another episode on it.
Perhaps we shall never. But perhaps we might.
We shall see.
Well, this episode isn't very cheery or our usual comical,
idiotic selves.
Right. Arguing back and forth. There was a lot of agreeing with each other and more like our demonstration of how wowed we were by the movie and how much it wasn't what we expected. But some movies are just like that.
That's true.
They blow your mind.
They go beyond a movie.
Yep.
Or they go beyond just a film. Yeah, sorry if you were hoping for a happy little episode today.
Yeah.
Not quite. Not quite. You know, I can't really help but just recommend this film. Obviously not to a younger viewer.
Yeah.
Anyone like under the age of 17.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend.
It's kind of disturbing.
It is. It's extremely disturbing.
Yeah.
It's a very hard subject to talk about.
Right.
But still, go watch this film.
Yeah, go watch it.
Go watch it.
Go
Cry
watch
your eyes out.
Go watch him.
Yeah. Yeah, watch him. Watch him. Watch him.
I was so surprised by how much cussing was in this movie. For 1931, there was a lot.
It's true. Like I said, this film could have been made today, and
back then it wasn't appropriate to have all that language on the screen.
It's true, but then again, Harold Lloyd gives a finger in one of his. He did. I remember watching him and be like,
am I old enough to watch this?
I remember just being like, wait, did he actually?
Yeah, he did.
Wow.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, you know, I take that back. A lot of old movies do have a lot of cussing, but
that's true.
Not a lot of the ones that I've seen. Because a lot of the ones that I've seen are comedies and lighthearted stuff.
Yeah, comedy thrillers and such.
Right.
Small little movies.
But this one, was serious, and I was just kind of surprised, like, wow, that's a lot of cussing in it.
Yeah.
Well, tune in to our Scabby Hayze podcast. Next week, we will be playing some music for you all.
And hopefully have a much lighter-hearted episode.
Yeah, it definitely will. If you are interested in more episodes, look into Podbean, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. That's all our social media crap. If you want to listen to any of our episodes, any of our old episodes, they're all on YouTube.
Yeah. And I should say, we're limited on our amount of episodes we're allowed to release on our Podbean. Therefore, everything else, except for YouTube. So some old podcasts are going to be taken down so we can upload new. So if you want to listen to older ones, hop to it quickly because they're going to start going.
See you next time.
Goodbye.
No.
Somebody once told me the world was gonna roll me. I ain't the zombie, so it is dead. Stop.